$25. That was the winning bid on a 5x10 storage unit in Reno, Nevada, and nobody bid against her. Every buyer in that hallway had already looked through the open roll-up door and written it off. The regulars laughed when the auctioneer pointed at her, because a 22-year-old sleeping in a Honda Civic had just spent a quarter of her grocery money on somebody else's trash. 11 months later, a courtroom in Washoe County was arguing over who legally owned $20 million. To understand how a concrete locker in northern Nevada ended up holding a fortune, you have to start with two people who never met. One of them was living in her car in a Walmart parking lot on North McCarran Boulevard. The other had been dead for 14 months. Dani Ruiz aged out of the Nevada foster system on her 18th birthday. That is the phrase the paperwork uses. What it means in practice is that the monthly payments to her placement home stopped, the caseworker closed the file, and a girl who had lived in 6 different houses since she was 9 had 30 days to find somewhere to go. She shared a room in Sparks with 2 other women for the next 4 years. When the leaseholder moved to Boise in the spring of 2019, the room went with her. Dani was making $9.25 an hour at a car wash on Keatska Lane, working roughly 32 hours a week because the manager kept everyone under full time. That is about $296 gross. After withholding, call it $255. A 1-bedroom apartment in Reno that spring was renting for $1,100 a month and climbing because the Tesla Gigafactory and the Panasonic battery plant east of town had pulled thousands of workers into a housing market that was already tight. Landlords wanted first month, last month, and a deposit up front. $3,300 to get through a door, saved out of a paycheck that could not cover a dentist visit. So she slept in a 1998 Honda Civic with a cracked windshield and a passenger seat that folded flat enough to lie on. She showered at a 24-hour gym on a $19 membership. She kept her clothes in the trunk in 2 duffel bags and a laundry basket, and she moved between 3 different parking lots on a rotation so nobody would call the police on her for lingering. Here is the part that gets left out of stories like this. She was not sitting still. Dani had built herself a small resale operation out of nothing, buying cheap household goods, cleaning them up, and selling them at the swap meet on East 4th Street on Sundays. Coffee makers, toolboxes, kids' bikes, camping gear. The margin on a $15 bike that sells for $45 does not sound like much until you understand it is the difference between eating twice a day and eating once. That is the reason she was standing in a storage facility hallway on a Tuesday morning in June. She was not there hunting for treasure. She was there for a lot of chipped dishes and a working vacuum. Which matters, because the rules of that hallway are the only reason a $20 million collection ended up legally belonging to her. Those rules are stricter and stranger than television has ever shown you, and every single one of them would be read out loud in court 11 months later. When a tenant stops paying, the facility does not simply throw the contents in a dumpster. Every state has a self-storage lien statute, and Nevada's is fairly typical. The unit goes into default after the rent is missed. The facility places its own lock on the door. Then a clock starts. The operator has to send written notice by certified mail to the tenant's last known address, wait a specified period, and publish an advertisement of the sale in a general circulation newspaper or an approved public website. Only after all of that expires can the contents be sold at public auction to satisfy the debt. Auction day itself runs on a set of restrictions that sound almost designed to produce a story like this one. The facility manager cuts the lock and rolls the door up. Buyers stand at the threshold. They are not allowed to step inside. They cannot open a box, move a chair, or lift a tarp. They can shine a flashlight and they can crane their necks, and that is the entire inspection. Bidding is usually cash only. The winner has 24 to 48 hours to remove every single item and leave the unit broom clean, or they forfeit their deposit and the facility keeps the contents. So the whole business runs on a 3-minute visual assessment through an open doorway. Professional buyers get very good at it. They read the furniture first because furniture is honest. Solid wood and leather means one kind of household, particle board means another. They read the boxes. Uniform, taped, professionally labeled boxes from a moving company suggest an organized person who packed with intention. Mismatched liquor store boxes and garbage bags suggest a hurried exit, usually an eviction, which is the lowest value category in the entire trade because people take anything worth money with them when they are being put out. Experienced buyers also read the dust line on the floor, because a thick, even layer with no drag marks means the unit has sat sealed for years rather than being picked over. Unit B-114 read like an eviction dump, and that was the consensus in the hallway. Swollen, water-stained cardboard stacked on the left, a recliner with the stuffing pushed out of one arm, 3 black garbage bags slumped against the back wall, and a pile of what looked like magazines gone soft at the edges. 2 of the professional buyers there that morning had come for a different unit down the row, with a full set of matching Craftsman tool chests visible in the front. They did not bid on B-114 at all. The auctioneer opened at $25, which is essentially a courtesy floor. Somebody in the back said something about a mold farm. Dani raised her hand, nobody countered, and it was over in under 15 seconds. She paid in 1s and 5s out of a coffee can, and one of the regulars, a man who resold restaurant equipment, told her not to feel bad, that everybody buys a bad locker eventually. She went back the next morning with a hand truck she borrowed from the car wash and started pulling everything out onto the concrete apron in front of the door. The first 2 hours confirmed everyone's read. Kitchen goods wrapped in newspaper from the 1990s, a crock pot, bedding that smelled like the inside of a closed car. The garbage bags held winter coats and quilts. The magazines at the front had taken on water at some point and were fused into a solid brick that came apart in wet sheets. She stacked what she could sell, bagged what she could not, and worked her way toward the back wall. Behind the recliner was an olive-green military footlocker with a bad hinge. Inside it, in cloth bank bags and paper coin rolls, was a mixed accumulation of old currency and coins. Silver dollars, half dollars, a rolled stack of $2 bills, a cigar box of foreign coins from somewhere in the Pacific. She had no idea what any of it was worth. It turned out to be around $31,000, mostly in silver content and a handful of better date pieces, and if the story had ended there, it would still have changed her life. It did not end there, because the footlocker had been sitting on top of something. Underneath it, and running the entire back third of the unit, was a wall of flat cardboard boxes stacked on wooden shipping pallets. The pallets are the detail that matters. They lifted everything 6 inches off a concrete floor, which is exactly why the water that destroyed the front of the unit never reached the back. Inside those boxes, standing upright in rows and separated by hand-cut chipboard dividers, were comic books. Hundreds of them, every single one sealed in a mylar sleeve with a backing board, and the backing boards were hand-cut too, trimmed from artboard with a straight edge and a razor. Above them, in oversized flat portfolio boxes, were pages of original artwork. Ink on illustration board, blue pencil underdrawings still visible, editorial notes in the margins. Whoever packed that unit was not a hoarder. He was an archivist. His name was Harold Neary, and how he lived and how he died is the entire reason a court would later spend 11 months deciding whether Dani owned any of this. He was born in 1931, and starting in 1953, he drove a distribution route for a magazine wholesaler that supplied drugstores, newsstands, and grocery racks across western Nevada. In that era, unsold periodicals were not returned intact. The route driver tore the cover off, sent the covers back as proof of destruction for credit, and pulped the rest. Harold did that job for 26 years. He also, quietly and against policy, kept intact copies of the titles he liked, and he kept them the way a man keeps things when he has all the time in the world and no money for proper supplies. The original art came later, in the 70s and 80s, when publishers started returning pages to artists, and a lot of those artists sold them for tens of dollars at conventions to anyone who cared. Harold cared. He died in September of 2018 at 87. He had outlived his wife by 9 years and had no children. The storage rent came out of a credit card on automatic payment, and that card expired 3 months after his death with nobody left to update it. The facility's certified notice went to the last address on the rental agreement, which was a house on Vassar Street that Harold had sold in 2004. It came back undeliverable. The published notice ran in the legal section of a newspaper that nobody in his family read, because his family consisted of a niece in Sacramento who had last spoken to him in 2011. That is the entire reason a $20 million collection went to public auction for the price of a fast food combo meal. Not a mystery. A dead man, an expired card, and a 19-year-old mailing address. Now, Dani did not know any of this on the concrete apron outside Unit B-114. What she knew was that she was holding a comic book from 1939 in a hand-cut sleeve, and her hands were shaking. She spent that night at the Washoe County Library on a public computer, and by closing time, she had learned 2 things. The first was that a small number of the books in those boxes had recorded sales in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. The second was that condition determines almost everything, and that a professional grading service assigns a numerical grade on a 10-point scale that can swing the value of an identical book by a factor of 10 or more. She also did something that a lot of people in her position would not have done. She stopped touching them. Every time a raw comic book gets thumbed through, the spine stresses and the corners soften, and a book that would have certified at a 9.5 drops to an 8, which on a golden age key is the difference between a down payment and a used sedan. She rented a climate-controlled unit at a different facility for $64 a month, moved every box across town in one night in the back seat of the Civic, and told exactly 2 people what she had. Pay attention to that decision, because it is the one that actually made her rich. Those books had survived decades of Nevada summers inside a metal box, and the thing most likely to destroy them at that point was an excited owner. The 2 people she told were her shift manager at the car wash, who helped her move the boxes, and a comics dealer in Sacramento. The dealer drove out on a Saturday, spent 4 hours going through the first 11 boxes, and then sat down on an overturned milk crate and did not speak for a while. His walkthrough estimate, before any grading at all, was somewhere between $8 million and $14 million. The final number, after 2 years of certification and the discovery that the original art portfolios contained multiple cover pages from titles collectors had assumed were destroyed, came in above $20 million. If stories like this are the reason you are here, subscribing helps the channel put more of them together. And then, the letter arrived. Harold Neary's estate had a personal representative, and once the niece in Sacramento found out what had come out of that unit, her attorney filed suit in Washoe County. The claim rested on 2 arguments. The first was that the lien sale notice was defective because the facility had mailed it to an address almost 2 decades out of date and had made no reasonable effort to locate a current one. The second was unjust enrichment. The argument that allowing a $25 payment to extinguish a $20 million asset was so lopsided that a court should intervene, regardless of the paperwork. Dani had $400 in a checking account and a car with 290,000 miles on it. She could not afford a lawyer for a parking ticket. The filing also came with a request to freeze the collection. A stamped court order meant nothing could be graded, insured, or sold while the case moved through a system that had just spent a year backed up by pandemic closures. So for 11 months, she was a woman who owned an 8-figure asset and could not touch a dollar of it. She was still clocking in at the car wash on Keatskey Lane, still writing a $64 check every month for a padlocked room full of boxes she was legally barred from opening, watching the calendar turn over while her bank balance did not. There is a specific kind of pressure in that situation, And it is the reason a lot of people take the first settlement offered. Hers was $150,000 to walk away from everything. She turned it down. What saved her was a records clerk and a filing cabinet. The facility, as it turned out, had run the sale correctly. The lien statute does not require an operator to hunt for a tenant. It requires notice to the last address the tenant provided in writing, and Harold had never updated his. The certified mailing existed, with a receipt. The published advertisement existed, with the correct dates and the correct unit number. The waiting periods had been observed. The sale had been open to the public and conducted by a licensed auctioneer. That paperwork is the entire architecture of a lien sale, and it held. She found an attorney in Reno who took the case on contingency after seeing the appraisal, which is the only reason she had representation at all. The case never reached a verdict. In the spring of 2021, the parties settled, and the terms tell you something about everyone involved. Dani returned every personal item in that unit to the family for nothing. Photographs, letters, Harold's Korea service medals, his wedding ring, his wife's rosary, and the whole footlocker of coins she had already been quietly counting on. She also agreed to pay the estate a percentage of the net proceeds from the collection, and the reporting on the settlement puts that figure at around a quarter. Then came the part nobody thinks about, which is that you cannot actually sell $20 million of anything all at once. Dumping 400 graded books and 80 pieces of original art into a single sale would have collapsed the prices for exactly the things she owned. The collection went out through a major auction house in staged consignments across 3 years, a few dozen lots at a time, catalog after catalog. Auction houses take a seller's commission off the hammer price. Grading and certification for a collection that size runs into 6 figures on its own. Insurance, climate storage, and legal fees came off the top. And when the wire transfers finally cleared, the tax form waiting at the end was not the one anyone expects. Collectibles in the United States are taxed at a maximum federal rate of 28% rather than the standard long-term capital gains rate, which is a detail that surprises almost everyone who finds something valuable. $20 million gross became a number closer to $9 million after the settlement, the fees, and the tax, which is still a life, sitting on the other side of a doorway that everyone else in that hallway had already turned away from. She bought a house in Sparks for cash. She finished an associate degree and then a nursing program at Truckee Meadows Community College, and she works shifts at a hospital in Reno, which the people who know her say is the detail nobody believes. She put money into a fund that covers deposits and first month's rent for young people leaving Nevada foster care, because a deposit is the exact wall she hit at 18, and she knows precisely how tall it is. But the honest ending to this story is not the fund or the house. It is what happens in those hallways every other Tuesday, in every city, while nobody watches. Because Dani did not come from the auction world. She came from an economy that has no name and no paperwork, and it is enormous. Buying somebody else's leftovers and reselling them is one of the very few forms of commerce in this country that requires no credit check, no fixed address, and no reference from a previous employer. That makes it the last open door for a specific kind of person, and the people who walk through it are everywhere once you know how to see them. They are at the swap meet on East 4th Street at 6 in the morning, setting up folding tables in the dark. They are running estate sale leftovers out of minivans and pricing them on a phone in the parking lot. They are the ones at the storage auction standing slightly apart from the regulars, doing arithmetic in their heads about whether $60 for a locker they cannot see into is worth the week's gas. Ask them, and most will tell you the same 3 rules Dani never had to be taught, which are that furniture tells the truth, that garbage bags mean somebody left in a hurry, and that whatever is at the back of the unit is worth more than whatever is at the front, because whatever is at the front is what the last tenant was willing to lose. Nobody in that trade is getting rich. Professional buyers survive on volume and on knowing exactly what a used treadmill resells for, not on treasure. The overwhelming majority of units sell for more than their contents are worth because a room full of people bidding against each other on incomplete information tends to overpay. Storage auctions are not a plan. They are a job, and a hard one, and thousands of people are working it right now in rooms with no windows and no press. Dani is the outlier. That is the whole point of her. 26 years of a route driver's careful archiving, a set of wooden pallets that held the water off, an expired credit card, a 19-year-old mailing address, and a 22-year-old with nowhere to sleep, who happened to be the only person willing to spend $25 on a doorway everyone else had already read wrong. Harold Neary spent his life saving things that his employer paid him to destroy. Nobody knew, including him, that he was saving them for a girl who would be born 46 years after he started. If stories about the things people overlook are what you came for, subscribing puts more of them in front of you. And the video on screen right now covers a yard sale purchase that turned into one of the strangest ownership fights in American auction history. Click it and keep going.